Hey guys, Wolvie here and welcome back to the channel. Any opinion here is mine and mine alone. So for this particular video, it's actually part 1. I do not know if it's going to be 2, 3, or 4 parts, but it is going to be a multi-part video series, if you will. And it's going to be a fun, more or less a fun video for me to film, as well as show you guys what I'm about to do. Now, some people may be wondering what is going on. And to answer the question here, it is going to be a PC build video. So you're going to see a few things here and there in sense of like what's going to be part of the build. However, I will admit that this build is actually not for me. I'm actually building a computer for somebody I work with. His particular situation is that he is making car payments. As far as I know, the car payments are about $800 a month. So for me, it's just like doing something like this for him, you know, to make sure he saves some money, you know, in the sense of like, you know, buying and building a computer, that sort of thing, you know. It makes me feel good to do something good for somebody else. So I'm going to go over some of the parts that I have here thus far. I do have to warn everybody, I do not have everything for the build just yet. I am still, you know, waiting for a CPU and a power supply unit. CPU mainly because I'm waiting till I get paid to get it. And unless something changes all of a sudden, the CPU for this particular build is going to be the AMD Ryzen 5900X CPU. The reason why I'm picking that, and before I go any further, I'm going to go over why I picked the parts that I did. So for the Ryzen 5900X CPU, the reason why I'm picking that for this particular build for the driver is because I have talked with him, you know, what he wants, what he doesn't want, so on and so forth. And quite frankly, he's into like gaming, but he's also wanting to do some streaming, you know, multitasking. And I do feel that AMD is the better platform, in my personal opinion, as opposed to Intel. Because I've had pre-builts with Intel in the past for me, and it's a bit more nightmarish for me, you know, dealing with Intel in the sense of like the processor, all that stuff. I mean, my last laptop was in it, had an Intel processor in it, and I'm like, it's like it gave me some degree of problems after a certain period of time. So for me, that's going to be the platform. It is going to be AMD, and it is going to be the AMD Ryzen 5900X. Now, the case you see here, now I did some stuff off screen and in advance for part 1 here. Now, this is, believe it or not, the NCXT H510 Flow chases. Now, the reason why I went with this, it was good for me, is like, it was either this or a Lian Li case. And I really wasn't in the mood to spend a whole lot of money on a Lian Li case. Granted, Lian Li is a very popular case, especially their dynamic family of PC cases, but it's like, is it really worth me spending at least $120 for a Lian Li 011 dynamic family case, and to spend about another $300, give or take, and the monetary figures are United States dollars for the record. Is it really worth me spending about $300 US dollars more for fans alongside a $120 case at the very minimum? For me, it's not worth it. And the driver, he did tell me that he was a bit of more of a budget of $1,500 to $2,000 total. So for me, I'm like, okay, I had kept that in mind, and I went with the NCXT H510 Flow case instead. As you can see here, this has space, I wouldn't say space, but it gives, you know, a bit more breathability for the build itself. This does have like a dust filter inside that you can remove if you so want to. So I went with this because it was a more affordable, more within my budget. I got this straight from the NCXT website. So for the graphics card, it's going to be this guy right here. And for the products I have in this video, I will have them in the description below so you guys can get them on your own time. Let me grab something real quick. So for the graphics card, it's going to be this guy right over here. It is the EVGA RTX 3060, and this is the XC. Now you're kind of wondering, huh? You could have gone like the higher end GPUs, blah, 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 blah. Well, whatever. So like I said like shortly before, is that the driver was more into a budget-oriented build, and when it comes to first computers for anybody to build, whether it be for themselves or for somebody else, being more like into budget-friendly stuff is said to be recommended by varying people. It does depend on who you talk to, and it also depends on what you're planning to do with the build itself. So I went with the 3060, and I am quite happy. The beautiful thing with EVGA, like regarding their power supply units and graphics cards, is that they follow the product, not the person who originally bought it, which makes getting the warranty on these a lot easier and less headache inducing, or in my case, less chance of a migraine. Now for the cooler, this is another one straight from the NZXT website. This is, I'm going to get it over here. It is going to be the Kraken X63. This is going to be in white. I do want to mention here for this particular cooler, I'm going to use the cooler, but not the fans that came with the cooler. Now the reason why is that I'm not using the fans that came with the cooler is because when it comes down to like the wiring stuff, I just don't like spending too much time on trying to wire every last item, you know, like without me being close to rage quitting. And then, so for the fan sets, that's going to go with this cooler, it's going to be these right here. It is the Lian Li, this is the Uni SL 140 millimeter times 2, so it's going to be a 280 millimeter for these fans right here. These fans are going to go with this cooler. The reason why I'm going with Lian Li for like the SL fans for like pretty much is not so much the daisy chaining being a lot easier with the Lian Li fans, but it's also like the cable managing is a lot easier. It saves some degree of time. Now, I do want to mention here, I'm going to go back to the case real quick. You probably noticed a fan that's kind of sticking out like a bit of a sore thumb, like towards the back. Now, the fan at the back and the fan at the top, and I did this like off screen and in advance, those are also Lian Li Uni fans. These are the SL 120s, and these are times 2. And again, it's the same reason like that about the two pack of the 140s is that, you know, the cable managing is a lot easier. I already have the controller from the 2-pack of the 140s in the case, so that way everything is a lot easier for me in the sense of like, you know, getting things plugged up. And the cable managing is a lot easier. Now, like I said before, I don't have the power supply unit or the CPU, but I do have the power supply unit coming. It is another EVGA. It's going to be the 850 watt Supernova P6 that is 80 plus certified platinum. Now, the reason why I'm going with a platinum certified power supply unit, and it is fully modular with eco mode, is again the same thing for the graphics cards by EVGA, and that is when it comes to the power supply and the GPUs by EVGA, they follow the product, not the original buyer. And I'd rather have that type of peace of mind. And I say this, what I'm going to say here is a pretend scenario is that, let's just say I spend $2,000 for a 3090 Ti EVGA from somebody on Macari. Now, and the condition of the card is like, you know, never been open, you know, they want to sell it because of a life emergency, that sort of thing. Now, I can register that graphics card on the EVGA website for the warranty, you know, and then just say, hey, I bought this from somebody on Macari, and because they had a life emergency. So I'd rather go with products, if I'm able to, that follow the product, not the original buyer. Now, I do have some accessories coming up shortly, so one of the quote-unquote accessories, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to be as careful as I can. Now, this is something, the driver, he was really grateful that I got. And that is the Wi-Fi card, because where he plans to put this build is, like, he mentioned about his home having like a basement area where he's going to put the build itself. And this particular Wi-Fi card, it is TP-Link, the AC 1300. I bought this from Micro Center, and this is $40, and yet it works like a boss. Now, the reason why I went with this particular Wi-Fi card is I actually have this Wi-Fi card in one of my builds. Now, I'm going to show you guys something in my apartment. Now, that's my current modem router combo, and I have another one that's kind of like right over there. So, with this, I mean, I could use an Ethernet cable for at least one of my builds in the living room here. But it's like, I really have to be very creative with the wire, like routing the cable, the Ethernet cable, I should say. And I do have a 25-foot cable, but it's like, is it really worth me, try to do all the routing without risking something getting damaged or destroyed? So, for me, that's why I got this particular Wi-Fi card. You can see here, it has the heatsink on it, like already installed. And I mean, like I said, I have my gaming only build with this particular Wi-Fi card, and it works like a boss. Now, I do have these guys right over here. These are the Wi-Fi antennas. They actually came with this particular Wi-Fi cards, but I did separate these particular antennas from this particular box, just so that way, I don't destroy anything on accident, if at all. So what I have here, this is going to be the graphics card support bracket. Let me grab let me flip it over here. I'm going to put this in the build, and this is by JEYI. I got this off of Amazon. Now, this is one of those items that's less than $10, and there are reviews where people who use the RTX 30 series graphics cards, they use this particular very support bracket in their build, and it works so good. I 100% agree. I have 2 of these in 2 of my builds. Now, I have here some extra zip ties, so that way, the cable managing becomes a walk in the park for me. Now, you see here the Band-Aids and additional zip ties. That's, preventative measures. Now, this particular, I do have the extension cables right here. I'm going to double check something here. I know, okay, so this one right here, I believe this is my, let me double check something really quickly. Oh, gosh. Okay, so this one looks to be my, okay, so I have another one of these extension cables. And the reason why I went with these, I believe these are inland. I got these off of Micro Center, so I was thinking about going with the Lian Li ones, but I'm like, it's gonna be too much money, and it's gonna be outside of the budget I had in mind. But these, these are just as good. I went with white because the vision I have for the build overall is black and white. So I'm really happy, to have this. I do have one more of these for the graphics card. It's in the box, but I have, like certain things like organized in a very certain manner. Now, for some of the tools I'm going to be using for the build, you kind of noticed it already, but just to give you guys a more in-depth look. So these are going to be some of the tools I'm going to be using. Now, I do have a pair of, like, quote-unquote electric screwdrivers. Now, some people are going to be frowning at this, but there is a very good reason why I use, a hybrid style. And to be more specific, something to, screw some stuff by hand, but also use something, like the electric to make things, like, to save a little bit of time. And the main reason why I use electric screwdrivers is because I have arthritis. These things, save my hand, a lot of time and, a lot of pain. So I'd rather, have like the means, to save time whenever I'm able to. And the scissors is just simply for, to trim the zip ties, all that good stuff. Now for the motherboard. So for the motherboard, it is this one. You may not be able to see it too well. This has mainly white with like varying accents on it. Now this is the Asus ROG Strix B550A gaming motherboard. This does not have Wi-Fi installed, like pre-installed, which is why I bought that particular Wi-Fi card. It's because when it comes to motherboards that do not have the pre-installed Wi-Fi, you do have to have a Wi-Fi card on hand, especially if you don't plan on using the Ethernet cable. Now, granted, the Ethernet cable does speed things along in the sense of like uploading things or downloading things, but having a Wi-Fi card on hand in your build is very beneficial in its own right. And to be more specific, as let's say, you know, if your modem / router is in the opposite like area where your computer is, and that's something you have no control over. So for this particular motherboard, I did a couple of things like in advance of part 1 here. One of the things I did in advance is, like, I'm going to point to the two areas right here. When it comes down to these spots right here, the M.2 quote unquote slots, I've already, you know, got put in place the N.2 screw kit for each spot. And the reason being is pretty simple. They're the easiest to lose to them being so small in size. So if I get that set up, I'm good to go. Now, the second thing I did in advance, like prior to filming part 1 here, is what's known as a BIOS flashback. Now, some people will go, oh, you don't need to do a BIOS flashback if it's already compatible in out of the box. Now, the thing here is that I go with a little bit of a saying along the lines of, don't assume anything before you know for sure. And this does include things like the BIOS for the motherboard. Now, with that bit out of the way, this is, I got this off of Newegg. This is the RAM kit I'm going to go with. This is the Corsair Vengeance RGB RT, and I'm going to zoom in on purpose. Now, this is an AMD optimized memory kit, and that is the exact information you to see here. That is DDR4. This is a 32 gigabyte kit, and this is a 3600 megahertz, so, you know, setting. And again, I'm going with a black and white theme for this particular build, and I like the black and white theme because it's like, it's not all black, it's not all white. And the reason why I'm not the world's biggest fan of an all white build is because when it comes to like the lighter the chases, it's like the dust and grime, all that's easier to see on builds that are more white than black. So that's just my personal take. Now I'm going to go over each of the storage drives one by one. Now for the boot drive for this particular build is going to be the Samsung. This is the 980 Pro. This is PCIe 4.0 NVMe N.2 SSD. This is going to be the boot drive. It's very obvious as to why I picked this and for the boot drive for the driver's build. No pun intended there. This has a read speed of up to 7 gigabytes per second. So like I said, I'd rather have something where the driver can get to all the programs as fast as possible. Now for the first storage drive, it's going to be this one here right here. It's the second NVMe. This is the Samsung 970 EVO Plus. This has the 3.5 gigabyte read per second. And the reason why I picked at least 2 storage drives here, you know, this one and the 980 Pro, is the saying of you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, meaning that you don't want to have everything on the boot drive, because although it's rare, there is a possibility that you have a drive that is corrupt. And once things get corrupted, if you have everything on that drive, you're going to have to reinstall everything, including your drivers, and that becomes an absolute pain in the ass. That's something I don't think anybody will want. So if I were to put just the boot drive on the 980, make things a little bit easier, and then, you know, have the 970 EVO Plus as one of my 2 storage drives, that makes things a lot easier, a lot less headaches to be had. Now for my second storage drive, it's going to be a SATA 3 SSD. This is the 870 EVO by Samsung, and that's actually 2 terabytes. Now, with one of the things I will confess here before I go any further, that I have the computer I have in my bedroom has 3 storage drives total. Two of them are NVMe, and then the third one is a SATA 3 SSD. So this particular build right here is going to have 3 storage drives total with a grand total of 4 terabytes in storage. Now for me, the more storage the better. It takes a longer time for memory to be filled up. So that's that on that. So to do a bit of a recap on my storage. So right here, the 980 where I'm pointing at, that's going to be my boot drive. The first storage drive is going to be the 970 EVO Plus. And then the second drive here is the 870 EVO. All these are by Samsung. And I want to point out to reiterate that the 980 Pro is going to be is the PCIe Gen 4. And it's going to be the fastest drive of the 3. Now, I forgot to mention, forgot to point out, so I do have this other screwdriver. Now, this came with an M.2 screw kit, and you can find the M.2 screw kits easily on Amazon. I'll put a link in for that in the description below. But like I said, I'm not done with getting all the parts for this particular build yet. I am waiting on the power supply unit that should be coming in a day or two. And that again is the EVGA Supernova P6 850 watt power supply. Is fully modular. It is eco mode, and that's on that. And the CPU, unless something changes once again, it's going to be the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X. And like I said, I did a BIOS flashback for this particular motherboard in advance and off camera. So that way, once I get the CPU in it, it's good to go on that. So like I said, I'm looking forward to do the other parts to this particular build once I get the remaining parts. I'm hoping it's going to be this weekend, if not next weekend, which is what I'm shooting for. So with that, I'm going to try to post this before I go to bed, and that is that on that. So with Wolvie here signing off, I will catch you all on the flip side.